We in South Carolina are becoming more and more acquainted with water shortages, with a drought, and before that we'd been, especially in the lower part of the state, starting to experience some saltwater intrusion into the aquifers that we were gathering a lot of water for places like Hilton Head's development. And so now in the upstate of South Carolina, we're becoming more and more aware of just how precious resource is, in part because Georgia wants water out of the Chattooga, so they had a little problem down in Atlanta, and I guess that's why they want more water out of the Chattooga. So the folks at the Strom Thurmond Institute at Clemson are looking at preparing a water budget for the state, and I wonder if you might comment on whether this bill would that we're discussing here today would be helpful in that regard, or is that a local matter, or is this something that may be assisted through this bill? Maybe I should ask the chairman about that, but as a panel, the chairman might have an answer. He'll yield himself some time maybe to answer the question, but anybody on the panel want to address local water budgets and whether those might be assisted by this bill?
Well, I'll be happy to answer quickly. In general, water is often a very local issue. If the local expertise is available to evaluate the hydrology, to look at the resources that are there, to look at water use, do it locally. But we need a national assessment everywhere. You're not the only ones with these kinds of problems. These kinds of problems are coming up everywhere. Even places we thought water was plentiful, we realize it no longer is. And so we need a comprehensive assessment of water use and water availability nationwide, which is what this census calls for. The other problem is the political boundaries we have rarely match the hydrologic boundaries we have. We have watersheds that permit conflicts to arise between Georgia, Alabama, and Florida, or Georgia and South Carolina, or Georgia and I'm not picking on Georgia, but the hydrologic boundaries we have and the political boundaries don't match. And that's another reason why it might be useful to get away from local assessments to national assessments that really do these kinds of things at the watershed boundary, so we understand the hydrology, and then perhaps we combine it with the politics.
That's helpful. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Actually, I'll just pick up on that. It's the actual bodies of water, for instance, in the sense of a watershed. You look at something like an aquifer system in the Southwest. It tends to go over the many states with a level of covenants between them, but they tend to have very different laws on how that is operated on. You have a riparian system, you have hybrid systems, et cetera, and what that really gets down to is each state that's drawing from the water has a very different idea of what appropriate use is and how to assign that use to people. And so the water, as the water moves through that watershed, you have a very different usage levels, very different sense of security and a sense of health issues and things along those lines. Until a lot of that is understood or codified or standardized, you're going to continue to have conflict as well.
Yeah. I suppose one of the outcomes of developing a budget or a comprehensive kind of approach like we're talking about here would be mostly one of the key outcomes would be valuing water highly, and that means not wasting it, right, which is probably what all of us do a lot. So that'll be one of the outcomes of this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Inglis. And there's been a couple of members of the panel that have suggested